This is a translated German documentary about Marc Dutroux and the lesser-known Michel Nihoul. Marc Dutroux is the perpetrator in Belgium's most famous and horrible case of child kidnapping, torture and murder. This part of the documentary focuses on Michel Nihoul and what he might have had to do with the kidnapping and abuse of children. Thank you for listening.
Photos from the Belgian police. Child molester Marc Dutroux replicates his crimes for the investigators. Evidence presented in the trial of Dutroux. A monstrous crime that has left many open wounds, and many unanswered questions. There is hardly any doubt about Marc Dutroux being guilty. But, was he being protected? What role did the dubious businessman Michel Nihoul play, who is also being prosecuted?
Welche Rolle spielt ein dubioser Geschäftsmann aus Brüssel, der jetzt mit auf der Anklagebank sitzt? Michel Nihoul. Gab dem ZDF ein exklusives Interview. Die Schlüsselfigur im Prozess gegen Marc Dutroux.
Michel Nihoul. He gave the ZDF an exclusive interview. He's the key figure in the trial of Marc Dutroux. I am accused of being the head of a gang of criminals whose crimes are unknown to me. If I were the boss, then isn't it amazing that the boss can move freely while the gang members are in jail? It isn't fair. And it's time for this injustice to end. With all the resources available to the Belgian police and judicial committee these days, it is impossible to make such a legal mistake. Simply impossible. I did not buy 300 investigators, there would have to have been at least one who refused. I couldn't buy all the judges from Brussels to Neufchâteau, or all of Belgium, for that matter. Then we might as well overthrow everything. And I'll take the place of the king who resigns because I am so powerful. That is ridiculous.
Können wir auch alles umstürzen und ich nehme den Platz des Königs ein, der zurücktritt, weil ich so mächtig bin. Das ist doch lächerlich.
Es ist soweit.
It's time. Finally, the long-awaited trial takes place in Arno, southern Belgium. The child molester Marc Dutroux is in court. The trial breaks every record. 7.5 years of preliminary investigation, a court file of 440,000 pages, 2 federal prosecutors, 486 witnesses, and 1,340 accredited journalists. A look back. August 1996. The child molester Marc Dutroux is presented to the magistrate. Even his alleged helper Michel Nihoul must go to jail, as well as his wife Michelle Martin. It's been a few hours since it is known that 2 girls have been freed from Dutroux's cellar. The angry crowd stands yelling, anger and horror written on their faces. The Brussels businessman Michel Nihoul is the suspected head of the gang. During that time, he was suspected of delivering the girls that were kidnapped by Dutroux to wealthy customers.
Mutmaßlicher Chef der Bande, der Brüsseler Geschäftsmann Michel Nihoul. Damals der Verdacht, soll die von Dutroux entführten Mädchen an reiche Kunden geliefert haben.
Only after Dutroux was interrogated for 2 days continuously, he confesses what the investigators had long suspected. He had built a dungeon in the basement of one of his 5 houses. Hidden behind a shelf, the police find the 1.6-meter-high room in which he imprisoned his victims. The 14-year-old Laetitia, who disappeared for 6 days, and the 11-year-old Sabine, are released. Sabine spent 80 days in the basement. Hardly anyone hoped to find her still alive. Relief and joy are indescribable as Laetitia is brought home by her mother. Neighbors have been waiting for hours to greet them. The weeks of agony have marked the face of little Sabine. "I've missed you so much," is the only thing she can manage to say when her parents hug her. But there is a suspicion that more girls who disappeared were victims of the child molester. The search begins in the following days. Every little corner of Dutroux's houses is rummaged through thoroughly. Lastly, on the grounds of another of Dutroux's houses, corpses have been found: the murdered accomplice, and 2 missing girls. Julie was 8, and Melissa 9 when they disappeared. They were imprisoned in Dutroux dungeon for months, and in the end, they were cruelly starved to death. All of Belgium mourns with the parents. The father of a still missing girl hugs the father of the dead Julie. He still hopes to find his daughter Anne alive. How could it happen that the girls were not released in time? Questions get loud. Does Dutroux belong to a child molester ring? Did he even get protection from the police? The house of the murdered Dutroux accomplice is also turned upside down, around the clock. Then the news that the bodies of 2 other missing girls are found, Effie and Anne. "We do not need to look anymore," says Anne's desperate father. This fate brings together the parents of the victims. They demand the ruthless investigation and clarification of crimes. Then photos of a thank you celebration with the freed girls appear. The examining magistrate, who put Dutroux to prison, was also present at the celebration. Because of his participation in the celebration, the court mandated his removal because of partiality. Belgium is outraged. The very man who managed to save the children. The Supreme Court ordered the dismissal of examining magistrate Connerat. The anger of the people turned into the biggest demonstration in the country's history. More than 300,000 people marched to protest in Brussels, what was to be called the White March. With much emotion, the freed girls Laetitia and Sabine thanked the crowd.
Bewegt bedanken sich die befreiten Mädchen Laetitia und Sabine.
Un grand merci à tous d'être venus si nombreux. Merci. Merci aussi à tout le monde d'être venu.
A new examining magistrate is appointed. The inexperienced Jacques Langlois. He is supposed to solve the worst case in Belgian legal history. And he leaves no room for doubt. He insists Marc Dutroux was just a perverted lone offender. Even today, Dutroux maintains his statement that he kidnapped the girls to enlarge his family. But one of Dutroux's former tenants sees it differently. "We sat in the van and arrived at Marseille. He asked, 'Do you want to make some money?' I thought with work or something. He said, 'I'll give you 150,000 francs. Get me a girl and I'll pay you 150,000 francs. I said, 'You know I do not kidnap children. You've asked me that once before, I'm not interested.' He didn't talk as if he kept the girls to himself, to abuse them himself. He always talked about taking them abroad, again and again. He never said that they were for himself. Business. Yes, business. The first interrogation of Dutroux's accomplice, Lelièvre, confirmed the suspicion that there was more. A quotation from the police protocol. Dutroux told me that his role was to kidnap the girls, to make them realize that they would never go home again, make them docile, according to the wishes of the people who ordered them, and then deliver them. Dutroux's wife Michelle Martin tells the investigators after her arrest, "I became more and more convinced that Marc Dutroux and Jean Nihoul had bad deals going on that I should not know about. I heard it with my own ears, that Marc told Michel Lelièvre he should bring a girl for Michel Nihoul. What role did Michel Nihoul really play? The man with 1,000 professions, of whom is said, he deals in power and influence.
Welche Rolle spielte Michel Nihoul wirklich, der Mann mit den 1000 Berufen, von dem man sagt, handle mit Macht und Einfluss?"
Zeebrugge, on the Belgian coast. We visit the only accused, who walks free until the trial begins. The alleged head of the gang, Michel Nihoul.
Der mutmaßliche Hintermann der Bande, Michel Nihoul.
You have admitted several times to have participated in sex orgies,
Sie haben
even organizing them.
an Sexorgien teilgenommen zu haben. Sie sogar organisiert
No, I have never organized such a thing. There are enough organizers, I do not have to do that. But I participated for 4 to 5 years.
Aber ich habe 4 bis 5 Jahre daran teilgenommen.
I met people who took me to such sex clubs.
Leute kennengelernt, die mich mitgenommen haben.
At that time I found taste for it, but I only met adults there, who did that voluntarily. I have never seen drugs or children there. Also, I've never heard anyone there complain about blackmail.
Über Erpressungen beschwerte.
In the years past, this castle in Falatumbe in southern Belgium, was the place where sex orgies were organized for rich and important people. There were 150 couples, which was immense. And everything was sealed off, so that minors and people, who had no business there, could not come in. The things happening there are the things that happen at sex orgies with adults. But there were no minors. And I certainly was not the one who had organized the whole thing.
Man sagt, dass sie sogar eine Zeit
It was said that you even lived there for a while? We stayed in the castle for 1 month, me and my girlfriend. That was a short month. It was a place of pleasure. You could play tennis and ride horses there. Rue des Atribat, an ordinary street in an ordinary Brussels suburb.
gewöhnlichen Brüsseler Vorort.
Hidden inside this house, there was an unusual club, the sex club called Les Atribat. Among the customers were judges, politicians, and other senior people. At least that's what the owner says. The club I went to the most was the Club Les Atribat. I went there regularly, sometimes to drink a glass, to meet friends, to discuss, and to enjoy myself. The club was run decently, and you knew that you would meet interesting people there. Not like in a pub where you meet drunks. One day a taxi driver calls the Brussels police. He does not want to be on camera, but even today, confirms his statement made to the police.
Aus dem Vernehmungsprotokoll.
From the interrogation protocol, I drove Mr. X to the Rue des Atribat in Dutroux. He asked me to follow him to the first floor because he wanted to pay me inside. When I entered the room, there were 3 young girls, 12 and 13 years of age. They were almost naked. They wore negligées. I saw that they were young girls because they did not have pubic hair yet.
Wird der Fall eines anderen verschwundenen Mädchens wieder
Shortly after Dutroux's arrest, the case of another missing girl is reopened. Lobna Ben Issa.
soll sie missbraucht und umgebracht worden sein.
This is the gas station where it's said she was abused and killed.
Jahre nicht möglich schien, gelingt jetzt und
Clarification seemed impossible for years, suddenly is a success, Even without new information, they find the body of the girl and the perpetrator. The petrol station tenant, a previously convicted rapist Patrick Déruchette. Nearby is the now closed Club de Dolo. It was, at the time, a legendary meeting place for people from the underworld. Déruchette was also one of the customers. De Dolo was a club that I visited, but I always went there late in the evening or Friday nights to meet with friends. It could be that Déruchette was there, but never at the same time as me. In any case, I never met him. That's for sure. But investigations after Lobna Benis's death revealed that Michel Nihoul is said to have fueled at Déruchette's gas station as well. No, never, and I'm not saying this because of Déruchette. If I had been there, I would say it. There is nothing wrong with going to a gas station. Well, they say yes, you were at the gas station, yes, you know Dutroux. But Dutroux and also Déruchette had a baker, they had a butcher who served them, and that doesn't make these people guilty by any stretch. What really happened to Lobna, we will never know. Déruchette was declared insane, the investigations stopped, and the file was closed without a trial. That's right, life happens to consist of coincidences. For example, the unbelievable coincidence that allowed the investigators to find Subin and Laetitia. Thanks to a passerby with an extraordinary ability to observe, and who was in the right place at the right moment. He sees a white Renault Traffic, and remembers the first 3 letters of the license plate. There are only a few, and one belongs to Marc Dutroux. That's incredible luck. Mr. Nihoul is simply unlucky, he met the wrong people at the wrong time. The city of Charleroi. Marc Dutroux territory. 4 months after his arrest, Michel Pirot is shot in cold blood on a parking lot. Michel Pirot and his wife, a former prostitute, had set up a small private zoo in the garden of their restaurant. Fittingly, the name of the restaurant is Arche Noah, Noah's Ark. In addition to the restaurant, Pirot owned several pubs and brothels, such as the Sapin Vert, just meters from the Arche Noah. Did you know Michel Pirot? No, I've been asked this question before. I was shown his picture, but I never saw Michel Pirot. I never met him. He came from Charleroi. He had a restaurant there. I've never been to a pub owned by Michel Pirot. From the interview record of Pirot's wife, the official presented photos and made these notes. Officer, she definitely recognizes the person as Nihoul. Looking at the photos again, she remembers that Nihoul was with her. I have not been to Charleroi. I had no friends there. You were never in the Arche Noah? No, people have already talked to me about it, and also about other establishments. La Terrasse? I don't know it, I do not know it. During the interrogations, Pirot's wife testified that she recognized Nihoul as a customer of her La Terrasse restaurant. Nihoul always came into the Miss Bar at night, always accompanied by a dark-skinned girl. The Miss Bar? No, I've never been to Charleroi. The Sapin Vert? No, that does not ring a bell. Pirot is well informed about everything that happens in the underworld of Charleroi. The nightclubs and brothels are his milieu. Right before his death, he calls the families of Julie and Melissa. He has important information for them. He was here with you shortly before his death? Yes, he wanted a perm, he wanted curls. Why? He said he wanted to change his appearance. Michel wanted to organize an evening get-together and reveal some things. I cannot say exactly what it was about. We do not know because he was killed before he could tell us. Michel Pirot's wife was sentenced to 15 years in prison. She supposedly gave the order for his murder. But the actual killers are still at large. Links relating to the Dutroux case have not been investigated further. After the arrest of Michel Nihoul in August '96, a young woman shows up at the Belgian police. Regina Louf is assigned file number X1. She recognized Michel Nihoul on television. It was a huge shock to me. The first time I saw him on TV, I turned away and walked out. Also, I never expected to see one of these people caught on the television. Actually, I have always lived with the idea that such people can do whatever they want with impunity. X1 stated that she was abused for years by a child molester ring that also included high-ranking people. One of them was Michel Nihoul. It's very simple. I do not know Regina Louf, I never saw her and I never met her. I knew Nihoul from middle to late 70s, early 80s. He has not changed much. His appearance has remained almost the same. That's why I immediately recognized him as one of the pimps, who abused the children himself and made them docile, so they can be abused. In several nights of interrogation, she tells of her horrible youth, and tells how she watched as another girl, whom she calls Chrissy, was tortured to death. When the national prosecutor hears of her story, he recognizes parallels to a 12-year-old unsolved homicide in a deserted mushroom farm. The victim, the young Christine Van Hees. X1 considers Michel Nihoul one of the offenders. I had the impression that she had a very intense friendship with him, and he actually abused her trust. He abused their friendship to force her into prostitution. But that was only partially successful, because Christine resisted, and later said that she would talk about it, with her brother, her parents, and her friends. And she was apparently dangerous to the people of this network, including Nihoul, and that's why they murdered her.
Und sie wurde anscheinend gefährlich für die Menschen aus diesem Netzwerk, unter anderem Nihoul. Und darum haben sie ermordet.
Before her death, Christine Van Hees could often be seen at a free radio station, where Nihoul was a presenter. I'm thinking about it. I have seen her photo, I forget names, but when I see someone in a photo, I recognize them. I didn't recognize her picture at all. Examining Magistrate Jean-Claude Van Ispen is to investigate in the case. Spicy detail, the sister of the examining magistrate is the godmother of Nihoul's daughter. Is Regina Louf aka X1 telling the truth? The judiciary does not believe it. The investigators that interviewed X1 are accused of manipulating and falsifying the files. Regina Louf is declared incompetent by the Belgian judiciary. Her testimonies are declared the fairy tales of a crazy person and disregarded. Still, how did X1 know so many details about this gruesome murder? Details that have never been disclosed to the public. How does she know so much about the place where the murder happened? An abandoned mushroom farm that was demolished many years ago. I was confronted with the statements of Regina Louf, her description of the place, and I found that much of what she says matches the truth. My family and I believe Regina was once in there. At least once. She's crazy. The senior prosecutors have said it, and now she is trying to go to trial. But she was rejected as a witness. What she says are just lies. It's crazy. Regina Louf is not the only witness who will be missed during the big trial. Anna Konjvoda. She reported as a witness to the examining magistrate, then, She was found and pulled out of the water, beaten and strangled. The murder case remains unsolved. Jose Stepp claimed he had important information. He died the day before he was to talk to the police. Bruno Tagliaferro was the owner of a junkyard and knew Dutroux. He was poisoned. His wife Fabienne Joapart, "Since my husband died, I am struggling desperately for the truth to come to light. Until the end." Shortly after she said she found important documents of her husband, she also died, burned in her bed. Gina Pardens was threatened she might have a car accident. A week later she was dead. Her car hit a bridge. Jean-Paul Témignon. Murdered, police say. Only his foot has been fished out of the water so far. Simon Poncelet, policeman. Shot dead in the office during late-night duty. François Reskins. Run over by a train on the way to the police. Geigbles, policeman, suicide. Brigitte Genart, a friend of Nihoul's, suicide. Christian Cohen-Reds, witness, murdered. Hubert Massa, prosecutor, suicide. Jean-Marc Haudemont, witness, car accident. Nadège Renard, witness, car accident. Alexandre Goslar, Michel Pirot, Joseph Tissot, Virginie Pinault, Gerard Vanis, Gregory Antopin, Henriette Perse, Klaus Ba, Jean-Jacques Furt, Pia Poldreich, Sandra Klaus, Philippe Deleuze, Christophe Van Hex. At least 20 dead witnesses. The Belgian judiciary does not seem to be troubled by this. Whether or not the death of these people is related to what they knew, is never seriously questioned. Examining magistrate Jacques Longios stubbornly holds on to his theory that Dutroux is just a lone perverted perpetrator and only investigates in this direction. You quickly realize that the investigation was reduced to a central theory, the only one that they still found interesting, that of the lone pervert. From then on, all the elements or facts that did not fit their angle, were either removed, or changed so that they still fit into that theory. That's a problem.
Ich erinnere mich, wie Untersuchungsrichter Langlois vor der Strafkammer mehr als eine Stunde lang intensiv versucht hat, Nihoul zu schützen. Zu behaupten, dass Nihoul mit dieser ganzen Sache nichts zu...
I remember how the investigator Lallouix was in front of the criminal division, and for more than an hour tried hard to protect Nihoul, saying that Nihoul had nothing to do with this whole thing. He only spent a maximum of a quarter of an hour on the Dutroux file of my daughter Anandifch. That tells me enough about the whole investigation. It all begins with this. If one does not investigate well, one cannot conduct a good trial. Nihoul's connections to politicians can't be ignored either. The former Minister of Education Joseph Michel is one of them. I never met Joseph Michel. I knew him from TV and from the newspapers. He was a Catholic minister, but I did not meet him even once. Never had contact with him? I have never had contact with him. Nihoul sent a letter to Joseph Michel in the mid-1970s when he was in jail for fraud. The Minister of Education tried several times to get Nihoul out of jail early. Finally, he even demanded the judicial authority to pardon Nihoul, far exceeding his competences. Political party friend and supporter of Minister Joseph Michel, is Jacques Langlois. Langlois was examining magistrate, who investigated Dutroux and wanted to paint him as a lone offender. Another important acquaintance of Nihoul, the late former Prime Minister Paul van den Boynants. Both van den Boynants and Joseph Michel were members of the Christian far-right lodge CEPIC. Treasurer of this organization was Baron de Bonvoisin. Friends with de Bonvoisin is the lawyer Julien Pierre, who represented Dutroux until a year ago from this video. Coincidence or not, Dutroux's new lawyer, Xavier Magny, is also well known to both de Bonvoisin and Van den Boynants, Nihoul's friend. After the criminal court in Neufchâteau had decided not to indict Nihoul, it was mainly the lawyers of Laetitia who appealed against this decision. Either you have a trial with 3 accused, and therefore just the hypothesis of the perverted loner, a limited problem. Or, you have a trial with 4 people. Then at least the question would remain whether we are dealing with organized crime here. That Nihoul had to appear before a jury, has given me a little inner peace. Maybe there is still some justice. Mr. Nihoul, how was it for you when you learned that you would be tried in the jury trial? We did not expect that. I can't talk around it. We were completely exonerated in Neufchâteau. We had expected similar things in Luttich. And then the catastrophe, we were charged. Why, we still do not know. Laetitia Delez, the girl kidnapped by Dutroux, a few days after her release. She is a young woman today and wants to take Nihoul to court. Laetitia is still looking for answers to her questions. I'm also accused of having abducted and keeping Laetitia Delez locked up. She never saw me. And I never approached her. In the end, it was Nihoul's telephone that led investigators to him. In the days around Laetitia's kidnapping, Nihoul and Dutroux telephoned over 20 times. Dutroux abducts his last victim in the village of Bertry. It was when the then 14-year-old Laetitia came out of the public swimming pool on the evening of 9th of August 96, she was dragged away into a rickety old delivery van. Later, one family testifies that on the day before the abduction, they saw Dutroux, Lelièvre, Martin, and also Nihoul on a playground in front of the swimming pool. On the 15th of August, we saw the pictures on TV and we were shocked to find out that those were the people we saw in Bertry. Then we sat and thought about it. But they had already arrested them. We didn't think of testifying yet. We started arguing because we did not know what to do. On August 19, I called the gendarmerie and told them what we had seen. We saw all 4, Dutroux, Nihoul, Lelièvre, and Martin. Where and when was it? It was on market day. And it was about 2 o'clock in the early afternoon. Where did you see them? Near the public pool of Bertry. I have never been to Bertry, never, never, never. I do not know Bertry. After her statement to the police, the trouble begins for the whole family. The family is harassed at home, receives threats, is followed by unknown cars, and one time, they even try to drag the mother into a van. In the meantime, there are more witnesses confirming the testimony of Nihoul's presence in Bertry. But that isn't all. One day after the kidnapping, Nihoul hands over 1,000 ecstasy tablets to Dutroux's helper Lelièvre. Street value, €12,000. Some say, it was the payment for Laetitia. Nihoul denies the transaction happened for 7 years, until it can't be denied any longer. Now he has an explanation ready. That's not a problem for me. It was about an undercover operation organized by the gendarmerie. Today you call them the federal police, but during that time they were still called the gendarmerie. I think that the gendarmerie wanted to poke in the anthill of drug trafficking, in which they sent out a lever with a lot of merchandise. To stir things up, so to speak. As for your first name, I would like to know something more. Your name is Michel Nihoul, right? My name is Michel Nihoul, but since 1968 my name is John Michel. At that time I started broadcasting as a moderator, and that's when I started calling myself John Michel. It was the fashion of double names in Belgium. Since then, all my friends call me John Michel. And still today, my acquaintances call me John Michel. But my birth name is Michel. From Laetitia's first police hearing after her liberation, she hears Marc Dutroux talking on the phone. While sitting in the room where we ate, I heard 2 first names during a telephone conversation. Michel and John Michel. I heard him talking, ça marchait, it worked. The most famous criminal of Belgian history, Marc Dutroux, prepares for his trial in the prison of Arlon. So far, he has kept silent on everything. If Marc Dutroux belonged to a ring, why then, does he not mention any names? I'll tell you, he has the right to be silent or to talk. Not only does he keep silent, he also doesn't explain why he is silent. I cannot answer your question. I expect much from the proceedings, at least to get just the beginning of an answer. Did he announce any revelations at the trial? No, he did not announce any, but it is more than likely. The symbol of Belgian institution of law is the Palais de Justice in Brussels. Since Marc Dutroux's arrest 7.5 years ago, there is a small memorial for the missing and abused children there. After 133 months of investigations, 440,000 pages of reports, and 4.6 million euros of costs, we know very little more than we did after the first 3 months of the investigation. We still do not know who really kidnapped Julie and Melissa, or what else happened to them. We still do not know how Anne and Effie perished. We still don't know why Dutroux kidnapped the girls Sabine and Laetitia. We still do not know which role Michel Nihoul really played in this affair. Only he himself and Marc Dutroux can give the answer to these questions.